as anything other than developing a technical skill. Um, okay, so the first person in line, all right, there's this beautiful woman. Oh my God, she's just like, she's got like cocoa latte brown skin and long hair, like down to here. Um, her hair is like super wavy, so much body in her hair. Like we look at it, we're envious, and all she can talk about is how hard it is to like brush. Okay, so this is like not quite 100 years ago. And okay, where are we? We are, okay, she says she was born in Bangladesh, but okay, when she was like 11 years old, she was supposed to marry this disgusting wealthy old man. She said her parents, and I'll get like names and stuff, she's going to come through with that, but she said her parents were well off, and she was a beautiful, beautiful girl, and she was all set to be a child bride, but this man who was like very, very wealthy, she knew that he would be like a total pervert, that that her life, like she 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 just knew without knowing why that this man would literally torture her and rape her and demean her and be disgusting, and that if she married him she would be his property and he could do what he wanted. um, and again, she was only 11 years old, but she said that that is not uncommon situation at her time. And so she stole like whatever jewels and money and whatever, and she's showing a little food. And she slipped out at like 2 in the morning, and she ran away. And there was a okay, she's showing there was some wagons going, and she was such a tiny little thing with her little rucksack of everything, and she like slipped in under some like tarps in the back of a wagon and no one noticed, and she went off. And it was like an overnight wagon delivering things somewhere, and at like she's like for 5 hours she stayed under this like tarp, and she said there was like farming supplies kind of stuff. And she said there was something very sharp that was poking into her, but she didn't dare really move because there were some men riding horses, and there was also some animals. And the last thing she wanted, knowing how men treated um, unprotected girls and women, was for any of like then around 5:30 in the morning, they stopped in a outside of town to sort of camp a little and have breakfast because they were going to rest everyone, because they were going to leave the main roads and go on some side roads to someplace or whatever. She knew that this was like a civilized area nearby. So she slipped out and walked for 2 days before she got to a town that had a train. And then she slipped into a train compartment. She didn't even know where she was going, except she made sure it was heading away from Bangladesh. And she traveled and traveled and traveled and traveled till, like, always hiding. She said she was like a little mouse ghost. That's how she thought of herself, because she said she was surrounded by mice and rats, and so in her mind, she made this persona of the little mouse ghost. And her name is something like Sahara. She's laughing. She says, "I'm not a desert." Saharan. Saharan. I have no idea what this means. Um, and she made her way by this way. She said it took weeks of traveling and stealing food. She said in all this time, not a single person ever saw her. She was so good at hiding and staying in shadows and corners. And she said sometimes you'd be on a train compartment, there'd be other like hobos there, but she didn't want them to see her, so she hid from everyone. Um, and she made her way to Paris, France. And when she got there, she said she had not bathed in all this time. She was still wearing the same clothing she left, which was not appropriate attire for Paris, France, and it was like rags, you know. Her hair was completely, you know, she had pulled it back and tied it in a braid, and she had not unbraided it. Now she's saying once in a while she would have to unbraid it just to rebraid it, but that was it. Um, and so she got to Paris, France, and she said she was so skinny that you could really see her bones and her eyes looked big. She said she looked almost like a caricature. And when she walked, she was like all the time just sneaking and always having her back to something solid so no one could come behind her. And she said in her whole life, she never ever stole anything from anyone beyond what she took from her home, which she doesn't consider stealing. And she just wants us to know that she never went outside of her Hindu beliefs or her moral beliefs ever in her life, not once. It's very important for us to know that. So Saharan is just still this like little 11-year-old creature hiding. And she didn't even know. Oh, she said she stole food, but she's like, that doesn't count. No one owns food. It passes. She said that's just energy, and you come in here and then it's gone. Oh, but she didn't even know how to go about converting money that she thought might be useless in the here and now, and you know, a few jewels and jewelry and stuff into anything useful here in this place with a language she didn't even speak. She said that she knew a little French and a little English because of like soldiers that were always around and the like of that. So she knew if she had time, she could learn the language because she had like very, very basic stuff. And she knew if she went to any like Hindu community or temple, they would probably find a way to ship her back to her family. So she didn't want to do that. Okay, so she found an orphanage and she snuck in. She said the gates, the fence around it, and she said it was just on the outskirts, and it was fenced with a very tall fence that would be like impossible to climb. But she said it was designed to keep healthy children in. It was not designed to keep the tiniest lips of beings, mouse ghosts, out. So she managed to go through the iron rod. She said they're about this wide apart. She managed to slip through. And she was like a stealthy creature there. Like no one saw her. But she would go and she would take food and she watched how they treated the children. And she saw that some of the children were treated well and some of the children were treated poorly. And so she watched the difference on why were these treated well and why were these treated poorly. And she determined that the ones who were treated well were like the bastard children of noblemen and things like that, or the ones whose extended family had money to pay, and those who were treated poorly were the ones that, you know, they were only getting like state money for them. So, okay, she's such a clever little minx. So she said for 3 months she stayed there and no one saw her. She was like, so she learned how to sit for long. I mean, she would just sit quietly. But she said she grew up with like meditation, so this was not a big deal for her. To her. This was pleasurable. She got to have all this time with no chores and no studies, just hiding and meditating. It was. She said, what was the worst that would happen? They would find her and say, you need to live here as a student. But she didn't want to live there and be mistreated. So she watched and watched and watched and watched. And then she went and when like everyone was asleep, she would go and like bathe herself, and she got some clothing from the orphanage. From when the children arrived, their clothing is put in a separate place and they're put in uniforms. So she got some clothing that was taken away, knowing they would never need them again. They would like sell the clothing. And so she took an outfit to where she put together a few outfits so it didn't look like one person's outfit. And she snuck into the office and she was looking through files. She didn't get caught, don't worry. To see like what is the paperwork on the children who are treated well. And she said in this time, she would listen to them talking, and she would take little books and learn how to read so that she learned basic skills. And so she went through and she was looking through the documents for the children who were treated well. And she took one and she forged it to have her name and her information with a fictitious family. And she took some money that they kept there in the office and put it with the letter and put it all in an envelope. And she said she poured wax on it, and she knew she didn't have a proper seal, but she knew all about seals. So she took one of her jewels and put it on so it looked like a seal. And then she snuck out of the orphanage, which she said was more difficult now because she had gained weight. She was no longer skin and bone. She was looking healthy. But there was a tree she was able to climb and jump, go out on a branch, and then slide down the fence. But she said it was like an 8-foot tall fence. It was like very frightening for her. And then the next day she presented herself at the gate of the orphanage. And she was looking nice in an outfit, and she had her letter with money. And one thing about this orphanage is so long as money arrived to them each month or year or quarter, depending, you know, for a child's care, they didn't ask any questions. Because what are they going to do? Hey, Lord so-and-so, your bastard child here, but, you know, they, you know, and she said, this is not special to this place. It's the way it was at the time. So they brought her in, and they assumed that she, because she sent the letter from India, saying it was from India via some fictitious family and whatever, you know, and so they bought it, and there's like plenty of money there. She didn't know how much money would be expected, so she put in like a bunch. I mean, she had seen in the letters how much money was there, but she really didn't know like what was a good amount, so she put in like the very highest end. And she spent the next 3 years living at this orphanage, 11 to 14. She said almost 15, so more like 3.5 years. And every 3 months, yes, 4 times a year, she would break into the office and steal money and then like give it back to them. She's like, but it's not stealing because I didn't keep anything. And she said by living there till she was nearly 15, um, Saharan was, and they changed her name to Sarah. Sarah was able to, eat well, get an education, and she made friends, in the orphanage. Um, and she said she slipped out often at nighttime because she wanted to see what Paris was like. She knew that she wouldn't stay at this orphanage forever, so she wanted to see like what would her life be like after this. So she got a really good education because again, the orphanage thought they were getting lots of money for her, and then when she was nearly 15, they figured out what she was doing. And they were going to, she's showing this like headmistress, red with rage, not only at the impudence and the indecency, but also she thought they were making all this money. And she couldn't figure out like why her numbers were never adding up. And she would have like fired good people, and she had beaten a few, horsewhipped a few people, and so like suddenly like she was going to kill this child. And but Saharan knew where all the hiding places were, and so this headmistress, okay, Saharan was showing she was playing like jacks with some kids, like they were throwing some, it was some combination of throwing jacks and playing hopscotch, some kind of and she was playing with some other teenagers and some little kids, and they were all like having fun together when she saw the headmistress coming at her, and the headmistress reached out to grab her arm, screaming, "What have you done?" She's like, she knew the jig was up, and she slipped her hand out and ran. The headmistress was a little bit opulent. Sarah's word, not mine. Opulent and portly. And so she was chasing, everyone was chasing, and Saharan ran and found a hidey hole and hid under some shrubs and like managed to like find her way to a tree and swung herself out. And she's like, okay. So I'm asking her, what about her rucksack? Because and she said she got that because she kept it hidden in a place on campus where it was protected. She said it was in an old dried well, and so she said she didn't get it then because she was running for her life, but she came back later. She was able to get it. But then she said she ran. She like booked on out of there like a bat out of hell, and so she's now, nearly 15, and she's no longer a mere slip of a girl. She was beautiful, beautiful. Beautiful figure, like a real hourglass, which she said was popular then. I'm asking her on timeline, and she's saying this is just before the start of World War One, and she said it's very important that we understand that hourglass figure was greatly appreciated. And so she didn't know where to go or what to do. So she went into, she kind of snuck her way into a theater. She said she never lost the ability to sneak into places her whole life, and that's going to be important to remember soon. So she snuck her way into a theater to watch a show. She was going to wait till after sunset and, late at night and sneak back and get her rucksack. And she's watching this show, and it's like not the most appropriate show for a girl to watch because there was like kind of like can dancers sort of thing. Like it's a little bit risque, a little vaudeville, a little risque, whatever. She's watching, she's like, I can do that. A lot of these moves are not that different from you know, temple dancing and stuff that she had actually learned as a child that she enjoyed practicing when she was alone and no one was watching her. And she said, of course, you know, like the foxtrot was, I don't know, she's like, there was, like, dancing was a popular thing. People dance. She was looking and going, they're not that great. I can do as good as them. So afterwards, she went to, okay, she went to the backstage and she said, I want to talk to the stage manager. And so this guy, she's almost showing him like a stereotype chomping a cigar and, you know, and she said to him, I can dance better than they can. And she said, if you get me a snake, I will charm your entire audience. And he's like, let me see. So she started dancing. And she said, this is the only time, the first time in her life, she felt a little bit bad, a little bit like, I'm going to have to really do a lot of prayers to undo this. But so she was doing like some of the moves she learned when she was a child, learning like dances, temple dances, stuff like that, but in a more seductive manner. And she said, you can get me a snake and you will see what this will be. I will be your highlight performer. And he said, yeah, you will, but do you know how to dance with a snake? She said, I can charm anyone or anything. Get me a snake. That snake will love me forever. And he said, okay. And then he said to her, have you ever worked in theater before? And she said, no, but you know, I can handle anything. And he said, well, there's a few things you need to know about the girls who dance here. And he told her basically how they're expected to be prostitutes and this and that. And she said, no, you never want anyone to touch me because you will build me up, build me up, build me up. And then the day will come when you will sell me and you will earn more money from that one night than all the nights of all these women put together. And he went, that's good marketing. Okay. So, he said, okay, he said, come back tomorrow at like 11 a.m. We're going to go. Okay, there's someone who sold like exotic pets, like monkeys, things like that. And we'll see if you're as good as your word. So she said, okay. And then later that night, around, like she stayed up all night walking the streets until she thought it was safe. And she nipped back in and got her rucksack. And she said she shouldn't have gone back that night because they had guards everywhere and she was almost caught. And they did see her and chase her, but she got away. She said it was like so terrifying. She knew they would have killed her. There's no question. You know, she's convinced they would have just like broken her neck on the spot. So she went back, and the next morning, 10 minutes to 11. And the guy's like, I didn't even think you were going to show up. She said, no, here I am. And they took a like a little two-wheeled phaeton cart, a wagon, with one horse. She said it's a light cart or a light wagon. I don't know what any of that means. These are the words she's giving me. But she just wants you to know. And she says it has, anyway, they took this. It was like a Hackney kind of thing, but a higher end nice one. And they took it this place where there was a guy who had all these exotic animals, but like you and I would be horrified because they were like boxes and it was not, you know, it was in a dark, it was not nice, and he didn't run around like purposely mistreating anyone, but he wasn't nice to anyone. And he didn't get like attached to anyone because it was his job to like be shipping them in and shipping them out. And she said the whole room just was like dust and dung. It was just dust, urine, and dung. That was all you smelled, and the sorrow and terror of the animals. So she walked around looking, and she's like, well, let's see what animals there are here. There was like this beautiful tiger. She said, tiger who could be beautiful, but was so miserable that it looked more like a wet orange and black rag. And she looked, there was a python, but she was like, better not. And there was a boa constrictor, but when she looked in the eyes of the boa, she knew that that boa would choke her as soon as like that. And she looked around, she saw some monkeys and like little monkeys that can sit on your shoulder. And she went back to that tiger and she said, this one. And the manager's like, hey, you said a snake. And she said, this one, trust me. And they're like, no, that tiger will eat you. And she said, no, watch this. She got down on her hands and knees and she looked face to face with the tiger. And she said, I love you. And the tiger purred at her. And she put her hand to the bars in the cage. The tiger went and rubbed his cheek against her hand. And then she said, do you know me? And the tiger licked her hand. And she said, will you live with me? And she went and put both her hands and her face right up to it, to the bars. And the tiger went and he licked from hand across her face to hand and started purring. She turned to the man and said, this one. And the guy said, well, you know, it was like a ridiculously large sum of money. And the two guys negotiated until they got a thing. And the manager said, this is coming out of your pay. And so then she and he negotiated. She said, well, this is going to be my tiger. If I leave, the tiger goes with me. And he said, well, what would I do with the tiger? That's why it's coming out of your pay. And she said, however, you're going to earn money off the tiger and me. So this is what we need for like food, accommodations, this and that. I need a largest dressing room you've ever given anyone with a beautiful bed for the tiger so that when men come back and visit me, see this tiger, this beautiful, like, with curtains and drapes and cushions and everything. And the guy's like, this is crazy, but he bought into it. Her vision was so pure and detailed that he ended up just like everything she wanted. And so the man who had the place put the cage of the tiger on the back of a cart, more like a wagon, and they got on with him and drove it back to his place. And the guy's like, where are we even going to keep this? Like, they had nothing set up for it. Like, talk about the ultimate impulse purchase. He just bought a performer and a tiger with nothing, you know. So they like cleared stuff and all of that. And she said, I will perform for you tonight without the tiger. I will perform for you every night without the tiger. And you will allow me to determine how this cat and I have rapport and when the tiger is ready. And he's like, you got 2 weeks. And she's like, okay, that's enough. And she would go out, she said 5 shows a day, and do basically temple dancing in traditional outfits, only sexy. But she said, keep in mind, she was barefoot. She had all of her family's jewels, with jewels like anklets and on her toes, and she knew how to henna. She would henna her hands and feet, and sometimes she would henna like on her bosom and be low cut. And she said, just like the Dance of the Seven Veils, basically, except she never, like, her idea of undressing was like, she said it was almost like being a striptease artist, except she always had pantaloons or a skirt or, you know, and some sort of top on. She never got naked. And then after, she said within 10 days that tiger was ready. And She said after 6 days, the tiger was in good enough shape. Okay, I'm asking her. And she said it was a female tiger, which was good because the tiger was not as large as a male tiger, but still big. But she said, very smart tiger. And they had that like female, divine, feminine connection. And she said she thinks it's because the tiger knew that she was from India. And she said she never knew where the tiger came from, but there was a resonance between them, and energy that could never have existed from someone in Europe. That is at least what she is saying. So in her everyday life now, everyone called her Sarah, but her stage name was the goddess divine, Saharan. And she would even make up these entire, like, almost dramatic portrayals of coming out to, like she would have like a little drop, a stage backing of like painted like a temple, and she's got to be very dramatic. And so she made a new number where she the first time the tiger appeared on the stage, she said first they did performances where there would be a few people in the audience, like people who worked there that the tiger knew them, just get the tiger used to it. But after a few days of this, the stage manager would come up and say, everyone, you need to be completely silent, completely still, and do his little pattern of like, and she would walk on stage with the tiger and point to the tiger, and the tiger would lie down. And then she would start her dancing. And the tiger would get up and start walking in circles around her. And everyone in the audience would be like, oh my God, the tiger is going to eat her. And she would do this beautiful dancing in which she would be luring the tiger to her until finally the tiger would come right up to her. She would get on her knees and the tiger would lick her from the bosom on up to her face, and she would put her arms around the tiger, and then the stage would go. And then, the audience would go crazy. And she said that was the only moment that she had worry. The first few months she had the tiger, when the audience would go nuts afterwards, no matter how much everyone's there trying to keep them quiet. And she would walk the tiger off stage with this like little tiny leash, golden leash that like could snap in no time. But she said this tiger was amazing. So her popularity grew. Like she was bringing in big business for this place. No one had ever seen anything like this. And she said you can look her up of, like exotic dancer with tiger in Paris, she's saying this is like 1912, I think, maybe a little earlier. And she and the tiger like got along great. They since she so she basically slept at the theater because she would never leave the tiger alone, and she didn't know any place that would accept the tiger in a dormitory room. And she and also the tiger had really luxurious accommodations. But she was getting more and more and more popular, and the stage manager was getting like, worried, like what's going to happen here. And wealthy men wanted her to be their mistress, and she's like, no, I'm very pure and I'm going to remain that way. But she was receiving gifts, nice gifts, and offers, like really nice offers. But she said this was still like small potatoes. She was not like, it's not like this was the biggest, fanciest stage. It wasn't the smallest one. It was, middle of the road. And she was beginning to get offers from bigger stages, um, most of whom wanted her to take off her clothing, and she wouldn't do that. Um, okay, she's saying the nice thing about having a tiger in your dressing room is you never have to worry about any men pushing their advances more than you want. But and she said most nights she and the tiger slept together, like curled up. The tiger was on all the comfy cushions for her bed, and the tiger was her bed. I can't even imagine this. It's crazy, but she's showing. Um, okay, so she said the rest of her life. So just one more anecdote. She said then the rest of her life is like not relevant for this situation. World War One hit, and suddenly all the fights between her and her manager on money, and if she should leave for a bigger stage or help him stay and make this place bigger or whatever, all of this sort of became a moot point because everyone's going to war. And she said a lot of theaters were shut down anyway. But keep in mind, okay, so this is not good. The theater got bombed and her tiger died. Um, she had the tiger, like, she was trying to get her tiger to go, and the tiger was so, like, scared from all the noise and the people running in the sirens. She wanted to stay where she was safe, and she would not leave. And and Saharan was there, like, come on. And someone came and grabbed her and picked her up and carried her out. She said otherwise she would have died with her tiger. But she said she knows that. So her tiger's last moments were alone in terror, which is like she never got over knowing that. But she knows at least that death was quick because of just the bomb hitting. So she had her tiger, like when they got the body back, and it was kind of beaten up, from rumble and debris, but she had the tiger skinned so that she could have the tiger skin with her for the rest of her life. And for the rest of her life, that tiger's skin was on her bed, so she still slept every night. Sorry, this is really emotional for her. So she said she now knows, like from her perspective now, that her tiger released her from her soul contract and chose to die so that Saharan could go on with the life she was meant to. Excuse me. It really was a. And she said she couldn't imagine performing anymore without her tiger. It had lost all appeal to her. And so she actually became like a spy um, during World War One because she had learned to speak multiple languages by then, and she was very good at being stealthy and covert. And so she said her stories of being a spy, she would love to share with you, like one-on-one. So just wants to give you a few little details because she realized she's like way overstepped her time. She's like so excited to tell you about what happened in her life. But she said during this time from, in France, she learned to speak multiple languages. She said she was, no one, people assume a beautiful sexual woman is going to be one, a whore, and two, stupid. And so she always used these assumptions for her benefit to get exactly what she wanted and needed. Um, And she knew that there was so much in her life that necessity dictated she should go against what she held sacred, but to save her body and her soul for the man who would be her love, her heart, was very important to her. Um, but she became a very good spy, both covertly, like hiding, and like she could go to parties and dance, and then like sneak in and steal papers or copy papers or things like that. So she said it was really dangerous, but she was very good at it, and it was exhilarating. It brought back like some of that excitement she hadn't felt since she became like a stage performer. And she will share those stories with you. Like she said, when you go to sleep at night, connect with her and ask her to share, and just start imagining what World War I would have been like for this like beautiful exotic woman with so many skills trying to do like covert stuff. And you'll have kids there like, oh, I didn't even know half that stuff. How could I have like, it'll be really cool. But she said the reason she came through today is because she wants you to know that she's here with you, that she's powerful, and her soul is always hungry for turning adversarial situations into adventurous benefit, and that you never have to put up with anything because you're capable of finding solutions within yourself that will benefit you. And if it benefits you, by its nature, it will benefit those who deserve to be helped. And if it doesn't benefit others, then that's up to them. But you don't need to worry so much about helping others as helping yourself, because you're such a wonderful person. That's what she's saying about you. She says you're wonderful, that anything that helps you will feed out to help others as well. So you don't have to worry about helping others. It will happen. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. She wants you to just start being innovative on what will work for me, what will work for you, and she'll help you with that. That there's always creative solutions that other people go, that would never work. And then she's like, look at her life.
So what do you want to come on?
She's been with you your whole life. Mm-hmm. But she's with you powerfully now because she says you need to start really making opportunities for yourself that are for you. And release a lot of work you're doing that helps others but doesn't help you. That she said, well, yes, it's wonderful to feel good about helping others. Make sure you're helping yourself first and foremost, and that you're advancing and growing your well-being. She wants you to know she did eventually find a wonderful man and marry him. But she said that's another story another time, and he was much younger than her. She said aside from nuns, she thinks she was the oldest virgin ever. But she said opportunities are going to start coming to you. That sometimes you bypass opportunities because you don't see them as being like beneficial enough to others, or